Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from the Northern Rhone. This is a Saint-Joseph. This is from Paul Jaboulet Aîné. It's the Croix des Vignes 2021 vintage. So Jaboulet, a company started in 1834 by Antonie Jaboulet, and he had holdings both on the hill at Hermitage and in what is now Crozes-Hermitage. They had a property of 40 hectares, Domaine Paul, which is one of the larger properties in the region, currently defined as a Crozes-Hermitage, but the Jaboulet's ownership of the property predates the appellation of Crozes-Hermitage itself. The company stayed in family hands and was run by Antoine's sons, the eldest of which Paul Jaboulet Aîné, the eldest son, took over and grew the company. And quite rapidly, Jaboulet became one of the larger, more influential and more respected producers in the Rhône Valley. The company was passed down through the family, and in the 1960s they had an almost unparalleled reputation for quality. The 1961 vintage of Hermitage La Chapelle has been rated by some commentators as one of the greatest wines ever made. Alas, the 1990s saw a sad decline in the quality of the wines produced by Jaboulet. Unfortunately, in 1997, Gerard Jaboulet, who led the company, passed away, and in his absence, leadership was less well defined. There was a board of a number of members who couldn't agree on a unified direction for the company, and one was unable to stem falling standards in terms of wine quality. So eventually in 2006, the company was bought by the Frey family. The Frey family, Jean-Jacques Frey, a Swiss-French property billionaire who had for a long time had interests in wine, and his daughter Caroline, who's a very talented oenologist. And the Freys were both able to invest in the business and to give it some vision. So they invested both in the cellars and in the vineyard. They've converted the vineyards entirely to being managed organically, a conversion that was completed in 2016. They completely re-equipped the cellars. Strategically, they made the decision that they would place more attention on the domain-owned wines and less on the négociant side of the business. The La Croix des Vignes is case in point there. This is a vineyard owned by Jaboulet. For years they've made Saint-Joseph, but that has been wine that has included fruit and possibly wine made by other producers, and that's the Grand Pompey brand, a perfectly good Saint-Joseph. But with the La Croix des Vignes, I think they have a very special property and a wine whose quality will make it stand out. So the wine is from a 1.5 hectare plot in Saint-Joseph, and Saint-Joseph spreads quite a long way up the river, but this is actually from a plot overlooking the town of Tournon, and Tournon is just across the river from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And so actually I would guess that the hillside here is sort of a continuation of the Hermitage hill. It has much of the same granite soils. It's just that the river over the centuries, I assume, has cut down through the granite rock. And in fact, the site here around the Croix des Vignes is actually more granitic than Hermitage. It's fractured granite that's degraded into what's called gore, so quite a fine granite soil, and there are plenty of outcrops of bedrock throughout the vineyard. The vines are planted to a density of 7,000 vines per hectare, so relatively dense, not packed in, but relatively dense, and they're planted not in rows but on stakes and trained to gobelets, so that each vine is standing individually. I mean, they'll still be in rows, but they're not trained onto wires. The vineyard has steep slopes, and it's at an altitude of about 250 meters above sea level. Most of that altitude relates to the fact that actually Tournon is probably about 200 meters above sea level, but vineyards are on steep slopes behind the town. The aspect is south to southwest, and of course you've got the influence of the river, which is quite broad at this stage, modifying the warm Mediterranean climate that you have here. And this plot of vines was replanted in 1998. So the vines here are getting to a stage where they've just about reached full maturity and full root extension. So you should be getting low yields and really concentrated flavours here. I think I'm right in saying that the yields from this site are somewhere between about 25 and 30 hectolitres per hectare, whereas for most of the Saint-Joseph appellation, you'd expect to see yields of about 40 hectolitres per hectare. So in 2021, picking started on the 29th of September and went on until the 7th of October. So a relatively short period, but also only a tiny plot of vines. Picking was done entirely by hand. It would be impossible to do it any other way on such steep slopes, and the pickers picked into small crates, just 12 kg capacity, so none of the fruit would be damaged at all on its way to the winery. It would arrive at the winery as complete bunches. At the winery, the fruit is hand sorted. I think this is quite a good example of the sort of improvements that have been going on in the winemaking here. Since 2019, the fruit has been cooled on its arrival to the winery, so the fruit can start its fermentation quite gently. Vinification here is referred to as traditional. The fruit's entirely destemmed, it's crushed, and maceration goes on for 3 weeks. I'm not told, but I believe this is probably stainless steel tanks. There will be pump overs, but they're aiming for quite soft extraction, so the temperatures of fermentation are kept relatively moderate. The wine ages for 12 months in French oak barriques. Of those, 15% will be new, so quite a low percentage of new oaks, and also a portion of the wine will age in concrete eggs. So quite a restrained oak influence on this wine. There's also a note to say that malolactic conversion goes on, but as that note comes after the note of barrel aging, I would assume that malolactic conversion has gone on in the barrels and in the concrete eggs, rather than before the wine goes into those vessels. So let's see what we make of the wine, shall we? Looking at the colour, there's a nice depth of quite a dark, almost black red. There's a slightly sort of purple note to the rim. It's more purple than ruby, but more of a red purple than necessarily a blue purple. I can see the stem of the glass through the wine, so it's not completely opaque. Now the wine has 13% alcohol, which for a wine that's 100% Syrah from the Northern Rhone seems a little on the low side. At the same time, there's plenty of viscosity because the wine is throwing some quite large tears, and they're rolling quite slowly down the glass there. So obviously there's going to be a fair amount of structure to this wine. Let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas have a lovely opulence. There are notes of dark fruit, so sort of dark plum, dams and bullace, those sort of black stone fruit. So there's a juicy nature to the black fruit, so black cherry as well. Really quite vibrant there. There's a little bit of spiciness. I suppose I'm searching for pepperiness and not quite finding it. But there are hints of, perhaps cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper at the back of the wine there. Perhaps a little bit of meatiness as well, although not massively overtly as you can get with some sort of slightly more old-fashioned Syrah. This is a relatively vibrant, fruity modern wine with a lovely sort of fresh perfume to it. So let's have a taste. On the palate, that's medium to full-bodied. There's a good freshness coming through there. Almost a minerally note. There's also a grainy structure running across the middle of the palate. It's not astringent, but it's certainly giving a little bit of grip. There's a little bit of peppery spice accompanying it as well. The fruit has all those sort of dark stone fruit notes that we're getting on the nose. There's not quite so much of the juicy black cherry note, it's more towards a black plum, because it's hinting at raisin notes. This is more a wine of freshness than one with particularly overripe character, so those raisin notes are just sitting in the background there. There's much more of the dark dams and bullace notes, and actually the acidity is helping to enhance those and to keep them going as well. There's a lovely long finish. The oak is not making itself apparent in terms of cedary notes on the palate. I think it's more visible in terms of the graininess of the tannins that we saw on the front palate. As the fruits opened up, that graininess is less apparent on the mid palate and towards the finish. The wine has a lovely freshness that lifts the fruit through to the end. I think this is a wine that is actually probably still to open up a little bit. Its freshness is such that it keeps giving those dark plum notes, coming through perhaps to a redder plum as the wine finishes. There are hints of spice, there are tiny meaty hints, but really this is a wine of clean fruit, Now, the producers suggest that this is a wine that can be kept for 10 to 20 years. Given its acidity, given its elegance, and its really quite lean nature for a Syrah, I'd be really happy to see it do that. And I think it could gain a lot of lovely complexity. I think this could be a fantastic wine in 10 years' time. I think it's probably best left 3 or 4 years. I still get the impression it's not giving everything it's got to give here. But at the same time, I am enjoying it. Looking at our aggregated critic scores for this wine, I see that overall this wine gets a 91 out of 100. Because that's a score that covers all vintages, I suspect this is probably due a slightly higher score, so 92, 93. I think certainly its elegance and its potential age-worthiness entitle it to a score certainly in the early 90s. I think it's an elegant wine that has over-delivered on what I was expecting it to show. And I've really enjoyed tasting it. So thank you very much for joining us. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. It would be fantastic if you'd consider signing up and subscribing to our channel. We would really appreciate your support there. If you have any remarks you want to leave, please do pop those in the comments box below. We'd love to hear what you think about the tastings we're doing, the wines we're looking at, or anything else related to that. I will of course leave a link in the notes below so that you can follow that to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, and you can check up on the wine's pricing, its availability, you can look at what the critics have had to say about it, and you can see any of the background information we've got regarding the wine. If you have any friends that you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to share it with them. That would be fantastic. But most importantly, if you have some time in the near future when you can come and join us to watch another tasting, it would be fantastic to see you then. Till then, bye for now.